Hi there everyone, it's munyadumukwa for Blackset Comics, and I'm back with another video. So this video is not a how to draw video, but I'm going to be showing you my comic book, my comic creation process. So I've titled this video, I've titled it the comic creation process. But let me say it this way: there is no one way of creating comics, right? Art is so diverse, right? Art is all about creation. It's all about what you want, what you know. So there's no one way of doing things when it comes to art. So yeah, I'm going to be showing you my way or my method and the things that I pay attention to. So if you're new to creating comics, or you already do comic books but you want to learn some of the things that I pay attention to, things that enhance my work, this video might be very useful to you. So I'm going to be doing a series of these videos which will be showing you different things you need to pay attention to when creating comics. But in this first video, it's just I'm going to be just introducing the process. So I'm going to be showing you the method in passing, right, in brief. Then in the next videos, right, which you will find in the playlist of comic book creation, I'll be now doing things in detail, right? So in today's video, I'm just going to show you the process in passing, but then give you some important advice, things that you need to pay attention to. Okay, so now let's get into the detail. So yeah, I'm inking this page right here so that you have something to look at, especially when I'm going to be giving you some advice that doesn't have visual aids. Okay, so I'm not going to finish inking it. It's just a page from my comic book. So now let's get into the details. The first thing that I do, or the first thing that you might need to do when creating comics, is have your work written down, right? Have set up your chapters, right? Your chapters and your dialogues, because normally comic books are about the dialogues. So I'm sorry. Okay, let me clear my space right here. So set up your dialogues, right? It's very important to set up your dialogues, and because this is what will enable you to, this is what will help you to understand how you need to lay out your work. After all, you see, even in my when I'm doing when I'm laying out my work right here, I even see this A, B, C, D, all these will be different people talking. I even put sound effects. You see, this H, N, 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 G, G. It's like, it's an alarm, you see. So I put even my sound effects in between, right? So that when I'm going to be laying out my work, when I go to the next process, it will be quite easy. And the next process from here is the storyboards. That's what I call them, the storyboards, you see. So you see from here, when I write down my work, I extract everything from my head. I now I create storyboards, rough storyboards. You are not supposed to take a lot of time in this process, but it's just there to help you figure out how you're going to lay out your panels and how things are going to be looking like. So I think you can see right here. See, like for instance, this person is running and there's a guy here who's supposed to be flying. So after all, this process is meant for you. It's for your personal use, right? You're not supposed to use a lot of time in this process. Then after this process, you get into the next process, which is you doing the pencils. Okay, let me show you some of my penciled stuff. Okay, so you see here, I add pencil. I just take the paper that I'm using for my final work, then add the pencil. Let me show you more work that is penciled. See, people like to see stuff, right? Which is very important. Seeing is believing. If that's what works for you. Okay, you see, from there I add pencil to my work. Right? I now take the actual paper, whichever paper you use. I'm not going to be specific about the paper because of different people have got different pieces of canvas which work well for them. So here now I add pencil to my work. Okay, now when I'm satisfied that I've done the pencil correctly and everything is in place, I ink my work. Now, which is very important, especially if you're going to be working digital, you are going to finalize your work digitally. Inking is very, very important. It's a very important part of the comic book creation process. You see, here this work is inked correctly, I must say. Then after you ink your work, depending on whatever you use, whether you use pen or brush, whichever apparatus you use, after I ink my work, it's now ready for digitalizing. Personally, I use Photoshop. That's the software I use to edit my work, add color, add text, and all that stuff. So this is just the process in passing. So like I said in the next videos, I'm going to be showing you exactly in detail how I do it. So now let's jump to the pieces of advice that I need to give you, that you might need to pay attention to when you're doing your comics. So now the first piece of advice I'm going to give you is that never let any final idea or artwork or detail be an accident. Fine. Okay, some ideas come by accident, but don't allow them to get on paper by accident, right? You see, like even when I'm putting, let's say for example, you see right here, I'm inking this page right here, and I'm adding these details right here. Although they look random, right, I'm making decisions on where to put them. The reason why I like to specify on decisions, right? I like to bolden the issue of decision making when creating stories or doing storylines or whatever, comics. The decisions you make at the end of the day create your formulas, right? You cannot depend on accidents when you're doing professional work. So you need to have decisions that you make when you're illustrating whatever, when you're writing whatever piece of work you're doing. Make decisions so that they create the formulas you use in the future. All right. The second piece of advice is the design of your panels can make your comic book interesting or not interesting. All right. Let me say it this way. The way you design your panels, right, has got great impact on your comic. All right. Let me give you four aspects of panel layout that you might need to pay attention to. Number one, when introducing a scene, right? Let's say, for example, right here, when I'm introducing this place here where these people are, I introduce the scene with a wide shot. It's very important to use a wide shot when introducing a scene. You see, this wide shot right here is even limited, I must say. Let me show you this example at the very first page of this. This is just a rough printout, right? You see, I'm introducing people to a place, right? I put a wide panel. It's very important. Let me show you another example. When introducing the reader to a place, you see, it also helps the reader to identify the location, right? You see, like here, this might look complicated to some of your eyes, but you see, I'm introducing this whole space, this whole area right here, right, in a wide shot, so that the reader knows where everything is taking place. Another example, you see in this page right here, there's this very wide shot of this room, right? I'm not going to tell you what's going on in this room. But you see, in this room, it's a wide shot. It's introducing this whole place before we even go to this skull right here, which you can see. It's easy to identify that it's this skull right here. But before we reach, we go to this skull right here, we introduce the place in a wide shot. So it's very important to introduce your scenes in using wide panels. Now, the next thing, still on panels, things that are happening in a sequence. When things are happening in a sequence, let me give you an example of this page which I'm inking right here. So you see, this guy right here is like fetching water like from here. It should be fetching water from here, I suppose. Right? I'm not going to be telling you the story, what's going on, right? Fine. So you see, but we can see him going and coming. You see, things that are happening in a sequence. And the way I've laid out this work, it's interesting, right? When things that are happening in a sequence, it's very important also to think of the way you're going to lay out your panels. Okay, then one thing also on the design of panels, you need to pay attention to action sequences. All right, let me find another panel, another page which is showing an action sequence. Let me just first give an example using this one also. This is an action sequence, right? I have irregular panels. You see, these panels are irregular. They are not straight. They are like diagonal. The shape, you cannot say this shape is not regular. You see, so we're having irregular panels in an action scene. It adds a lot of depth. Let me look for another example. Bear with me. Some of the things right here. Okay, fine. Let me show you this. Alright, let me show you this inked page right here. See, these guys are actually running right from something, I don't know. But you see, because the panels are diagonal and they are irregular shaped, you see this vibe right in the action. It adds action. It adds depth. So let me just show you some panels that have nothing. These panels are intended to have some action going on right here. So you see, by having them irregular, it's okay. It adds depth, and also you see, like, let me give you an example of this unfinished piece of work. You see, there's this panel right here, but these characters are actually coming out of the panel, right, straight into another panel. It's just the design. You see, it adds a lot of depth and it gets more interesting to the reader. Okay, also one thing you need to pay attention to is before you close up on a person's face, especially when introducing someone, like introducing a character. Let me look for the exact example. Okay. Just bear with me 1 second. I'm looking for the piece of advice I'm talking about. Right, fine, right here. Alright, before, you see, we are introduced to a place, right? Like here, we're introduced to this place. Then we're introduced to inside the place. But we're not seeing who these people are. It's very important not to just jump to the people's faces, right? Especially when they're new characters. People like enjoy. You have the move with the reader. You try to think of what the reader is going to experience when reading your comic book. So you see, from here, we don't jump. In fact, we move slowly. The camera behind the characters, and slowly, bit by bit, we start seeing this guy's face slowly, right? Don't just jump into the faces of the characters. So it's all about the panels. You see, it's panel layout. It's one thing you need to pay attention to when drawing your comics. Alright, next piece of advice. In action scenes, avoid regular proportions. Try and have characters close to the reader. It's more interesting. Alright, let me give you an example of what I'm talking of right here. Alright, this is an action sequence right here, an action scene. We've got a blast right here. But you see, if I had my characters all straight up looking at the blast, it won't be interesting. But having like these characters closer to us, right, and some characters far off, you see, from different angles, like they're standing on different horizons, it adds a lot of depth. All right. So when drawing action scenes in comics, pay attention to this. Have some characters. I like having characters closer to us, right? Like these characters here, which are closer to us. And in fact, even when I'm coloring them, they'll be bold. You see, it adds a lot of depth to your. It adds the interesting aspect to your comic book. All right. Now the next piece of advice is that unless done on purpose, avoid speaking face panels during conversations, especially long ones. Play around with the angles. All right, now let me look for a page which can depict what I'm talking of. So what I'm generally saying here is that when characters are talking, right, avoid, unless it's necessary, right, avoid face after face. If you are going to be using face after face, like you see in this panel, these guys are talking from here, then we go face after face. But you see, even though we are going face after face, we are playing around with the angles. Here we're seeing them both, then here we're seeing this guy's face from close up, then here we see this guy's face from right from the front. You see, we are playing around with the angles. But like I was saying, sometimes you don't need to even go face after face. You see, these guys are talking, but we are seeing them from this angle. Then we go to the face, and this guy is still talking through this to this panel, right? There's going to be some dialogue, but we're not seeing his face. Just like in movies, you see, we need to learn from the movies also. The camera doesn't go stuck on the person's face. So you see, this guy is talking, and they're talking, but we are playing around with the angle. So avoid face after face, face after face. Sometimes it begins to get boring to the reader. You see, let me just show you something right here from what I'm talking of. You see, these guys are talking, right? But we're not even seeing their faces. Then we see, they're talking, but we're seeing them from different angles. See, it's interesting if you do it that way, right? I'm not going to show you the whole of it, but you see, avoid face after face. That's all I'm saying. Alright, now the next piece of advice is that viewing angles are so important. Avoid always having your characters in the middle of the panel. Right, let me stress on this. You see, I've seen this many people when they're drawing comics, they like having their characters. Let me give an example. You see, this character is in the middle of the panel, right? This character right here. Avoid having him straight in the middle of the panel always, unless if it's necessary. Have them, you see, like in this action scene here, at one point we just see the bottom part of him, right? Like here, you see, these characters are not straight in the middle of the panel, right? They are slightly at one end. Let me just show you. You see, like here, these characters are in the middle of the panel, right here, right? But straight from there, I put the characters in the corners of the panels. You see, so just be sure to play around with the layout of your panel, of your characters. Don't put things straight in the middle of the panel always, unless if it's intended. That would be fine. You see, let me just show you something also. Avoid putting characters. You see, like here, this character right here is in the middle of the panel, right? But as you move here, we're seeing him from one end. You see, like here also, play around with the angles, play around with perspective. See, he's at the corner right here. He's not like in the middle of the panel. Just avoid that. You play around with viewing angles. View from behind. I could have shown you a lot of stuff, but I think you understand what I'm saying. View from behind, view from above. Play around with your viewing angles. All right, now the next piece of advice is that when inking, when inking, I prefer using different pen sizes. Play around with major and minor lines. I'm going to use this scary scowl right here to show you what I'm talking of. You see, when inking, I prefer using, like I introduced earlier, I use different pen sizes, right? Now you see, if you can see this scowl, there are these lines here, which I used when for shading, right? I used a very thin pen, 0.3 millimeter, right, to be precise. Then the outer part of this the skull, right, the edges, the borders of the object I was inking, I used a 0.5 millimeter. Then you see there's some thick lines right here. You can see there's some very thick lines here. This is 0.7 millimeter. If you want to add depth, let me be very honest. Of course, there are very different inking methods, but especially when you're doing artwork that has got a lot of shading and stuff, don't stick to one thickness, right? If you've got one pen, you'd rather go over again, just trying to add thickness to your illustration. So play around with the pen, play around with the different. You see, like here, let me just give you an example right here. If I am to add shading right here, I have to use a very thin pen. Okay, the pen is actually like wearing out, but you see what I'm talking of. Use a different pen. Use different thicknesses of your pen when inking your stuff. right? Don't stick to one pen. So that's one thing you might need to pay attention to if you want to make your work interesting. If you want to add appeal to your work, play around with the different sizes of pens. Okay, then from that piece of advice, the next one goes, this is one of the most important. Don't strain yourself by thinking you can't do without reference. Even professionals use reference. Okay, now reference is not copying directly, right? Reference is different from copying. Let me give you an example of a building, right? You want to draw buildings, right? If you look around in the city, like in the street, or look out for free photos of buildings on the internet or using magazines, there's some things you will figure out that you wouldn't think of if you were using your own head to draw the building. So reference is simply looking for things that you wouldn't think of if you were using your own head to illustrate whatever you are illustrating. So don't operate in a vacuum like I'll use my own way. I have my own way. Sometimes you get left out. Look out for things. Check other people's work. See how people do it. Like, for example, you're watching this video, Our Ink. You might find out some things that are very important to add to your illustrations or for your comics. So use reference. Personally, I use reference. Reference is very important because it shows me some of the things that I would not have thought of if I were to draw the entire thing using my own head. Alright, now let's move to the next piece of advice. Not every font can be used for sound effects. Try and have your sound effects closer to their source. Alright, so let me show you what a sound effect is for those who are not familiar with that name. You might have your own name. Alright, let's say this is a sound effect. You see this whop. You see this guy is being struck in the face by this branch right here. And you see, like I said, if you're going to be adding these sound effects digitally, like I do in some of my comics, don't use any font, right? There are some fonts which can go along with the sound effect. Like you see this one, this warp right here. This sound effect the font here is going along with what? With the sound effect itself. And also, if you're going to be adding it digitally, if you're not digitally, the flow of the sound effect should go along with what the sound effect intends to portray. For example, this guy is being struck by this what do you call it? This branch. See this warp, right? It's the flow. You see, it's flowing. So it's something that you need to pay attention to, the sound effect, and make sure the sound effect is closer to the source. Let me show you another example, different example of a sound effect. Like you see right here, I don't know what's going on here. I'm not going to be giving out my stories, but you see there's this worm, right? Whichever way you're gonna pronounce it. But you see the way it's positioned, it's interesting. Even the way I played out with the gradient, it's something that you need to learn. We're going to learn this in detail in the future videos on comic book creation. But I was just saying, make a decision when you're doing these things. When you're putting your sound effects, don't just use any font, and make sure your sound effect is closer to the source of the sound. Okay, now my final piece of advice for today is that avoid adding content on your artwork during the inking process. Rather pull back Mr. and Miss Pencil back in the game. So what I'm saying is that, let's say for example, I figure out that as I'm inking, I want to add something. I've left out something. Instead of adding details, right, during the inking process using the pen directly, you're not guaranteed that you won't make a mistake. So because you could make a mistake, you'd rather invite back Mr. and Miss Pencil. They're very trusted friends for an artist, because you have got room for adjustments. You are very flexible to adjust. So introduce them back into the artwork. Then later on, you add ink. So this we come to the end of this video today. I hope it was very useful. If you found it useful, let me know in the comment section. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel. There are more videos coming that could be that have tutorials that are very useful for quite a number of you. Don't forget to check out Blackset Comics Facebook page. There we update a comic book that is free to read, and that is titled The Other Realm. Now feel free to read it, and you can, if you're a writer, just feel free. You might learn some concepts from there also. Be sure to check out this channel every Monday. We update a new video. Also suggest topics of tutorials you'd like me to cover in the future. If you are to watch this video way long after I've posted it, just make sure to use the email provided at the end of this video to suggest a topic. So with that said, thanks for watching everyone, and have a good one.